There's a specific polarizing kind of discomfort that washes over a press conference when an elite athlete completely refuses to perform the expected routine of false modesty. In 2017, shortly after winning his 5th Ballon d'Or, Cristiano Ronaldo stood before the global media and stated, without a single trace of irony, hesitation, or apology, that he was the greatest football player in the history of the sport. The reaction was immediate. Journalists laughed nervously. Pundits and traditionalists were deeply offended. They demanded the usual heavily sanitized script, the humble acknowledgement of teammates, the deferential nod to past legends, the polite, corporate lowering of the head. But Ronaldo did not blink. He simply looked back at them and delivered a sentiment that sounded less like a sports quote and more like a fiercely guarded manifesto. He essentially told them that if you do not believe you are the absolute best, you will never achieve all that you are capable of. We tend to look at these specific moments, the solitary, theatrical celebrations, the visible, physical fury when a teammate fails to pass him the ball, the hyperfixation on his own individual goal-scoring records, and write them off as toxic vanity. The mainstream sports media has spent the better part of 2 decades attempting to psychoanalyze his ego, often concluding that his relentless self-obsession is a fundamental character flaw that somehow damages the beautiful, collective spirit of the game. But they appear to be entirely missing the deeper, much more profound reality. We are not just watching a selfish athlete chasing statistics. We are watching a human being desperately, successfully illustrating a philosophical framework so controversial and so uncompromising that it actively threatens the conventional morality of modern team sports. To truly comprehend the architecture of Cristiano Ronaldo's absolute will, we have to step completely away from the traditional, romanticized ideals of self-sacrifice and team spirit. We need to look to one of the most polarizing and fiercely debated philosophers of the 20th century to decode the mind of the boy from Madeira. Ayn Rand was a Russian-American writer and thinker born in 1905 who lived through the suffocating collective control of the early Soviet Union before escaping to the United States. While most ethical philosophers throughout history, from ancient religious traditions to modern sociologists, have argued that human beings owe a fundamental moral duty to the group, Rand completely shattered this consensus. She introduced a highly controversial philosophy called objectivism, and at its absolute core was a concept she provocatively named rational egoism. Rand argued that the highest moral purpose of a human life is not to sacrifice oneself for the sake of others, but to pursue one's own individual happiness, perfection, and productive achievement. To understand rational egoism, you have to completely unlearn the cultural idea that selfishness is inherently evil. Imagine you are a brilliant creator, a scientist, an artist, or an elite athlete. Society will constantly demand that you lower your standards to make others feel comfortable, that you apologize for your greatness, and that you melt your sovereign individual identity into the collective safety of the team. Rand argued that this demand for self-sacrifice is a toxic, destructive mechanism designed by the mediocre to chain the exceptional. She believed that the ultimate engine of human progress is the sovereign ego, the individual who is driven by a clean, burning, self-contained fuel, and who absolutely refuses to compromise their vision or their standards for anyone else. Cristiano Ronaldo is the pure, living, breathing manifestation of Ayn Rand's objectivism. Look deeply at his origin story and the meticulous, almost robotic reconstruction of his own life. Born into relative poverty on the small island of Madeira, he did not inherit the established, comfortable pathways of European footballing royalty. He had to build his empire entirely from the ground up, and he did not build it through spontaneous, chaotic magic. He built it through rational, engineered design. When he arrived at Manchester United as a teenager under Sir Alex Ferguson, he was a highly skilled, somewhat volatile winger, prone to unnecessary stepovers and aesthetic flair. But what happened next was a fascinating process of objective optimization. He systematically stripped away every single movement, every single habit that did not directly contribute to his ultimate goal, becoming the most efficient, lethal, goal-scoring machine the sport had ever witnessed. His entire lifestyle became a legendary monument to rational egoism. He didn't just train, he engineered his physical vessel. Strict, uncompromising dietary regimes, hyperbaric sleep chambers, thousands of daily core exercises completed in absolute isolation. He treated his own flesh and blood as a prime mover's engine, rationally designed to defy the natural biological limitations of human aging. And when he stepped onto the pitch for Real Madrid during his historic, decade-long era of absolute conquest, this objectivist philosophy dictated his every action. If a teammate scored a goal but failed to pass to an open Ronaldo, you would frequently see him throw his hands up in visible frustration. Traditional critics point to this and scream that he is selfish. But through the strict lens of Ayn Rand, this behavior is not only logical, it is entirely virtuous. Ronaldo recognizes that his individual excellence is the absolute most reliable mechanism for the collective victory of the team. He does not believe the team wins through polite, democratic sharing of the ball. The team wins because his sovereign ego demands a goal and he executes it. This philosophy becomes even more glaringly apparent when we examine his unprecedented, decade-long duel with Lionel Messi for global supremacy. Messi was frequently cast by the global media as the naturally gifted, quiet, selfless artist, the acceptable, humble genius. Ronaldo, in contrast, was cast as the manufactured, arrogant machine. Society is always significantly more comfortable with the genius who pretends he doesn't know exactly how brilliant he is. But Ronaldo fully, aggressively rejected this cultural preference for false modesty. He did not shy away from the rivalry. He actively fed on it. He used it as the ultimate empirical test of his own objective superiority. While others might have crumbled under the exhausting psychological pressure of being compared daily to a player of Messi's caliber, Ronaldo used it to continually upgrade his own internal architecture. Ayn Rand wrote that the creator's concern is the conquest of nature, not the conquest of men. Ronaldo's ultimate opponent was never just Messi or the defenders he faced. His opponent was the concept of limitation itself. As his career advanced into his late 30s, the mainstream narrative surrounding him shifted violently. During his subsequent transfers to Juventus, his dramatic return to Manchester United, and his ultimate move to Al Nassr, a loud chorus of critics emerged. Pundits argued that modern football requires high-pressing, fluid, selfless attackers, and that Ronaldo's uncompromising demand that the entire tactical system adapt to serve his specific goal-scoring capacity was now a destructive force. They claimed he was holding the collective back, prioritizing his own statistical legacy over the fluidity of the team. But to judge Cristiano Ronaldo by the modern metric of collective self-sacrifice is to misunderstand the very foundation of his historical greatness. Ayn Rand would suggest that asking a prime mover to diminish his own elite output to fit into a mediocre generalized system is a profound moral failure. Ronaldo remained entirely unbothered by these critics. He did not look to the media, the fans, or the tactical analysts to determine his value. He demanded absolute validation through cold, objective, undeniable numbers. He knew exactly what he was producing, and he refused to apologize for the space his greatness required. To fully grasp the magnitude of what Ronaldo represents, you have to zoom out and look at the cultural and tactical evolution of football over the last 20 years. The sport has become increasingly mechanized. We have entered the era of the system where managers demand absolute, unquestioning obedience to complex positional grids, and where individual expression is routinely sacrificed for the sake of possession statistics. In the middle of this tactical collectivization, the world unconsciously craved a symbol of ultimate unyielding individual agency. When Real Madrid was desperately trying to break the structural collective hegemony of Pep Guardiola's Barcelona, they did not need another compliant system player. They needed a sovereign force. They needed an athlete who operated entirely outside the boundaries of collective modesty. Ronaldo became that symbol. He was the ultimate countercultural icon of self-assertion in an era that demanded conformity. But Ayn Rand's philosophy, while incredibly powerful, contains a built-in, highly dangerous shadow. The inherent risk of rational egoism is absolute freezing isolation. When you build an entire empire upon the premise that your sovereign ego is the ultimate engine of reality, you run the terrifying risk of losing your connection to humanity when that engine eventually, inevitably, begins to slow down. History is filled with brilliant, ego-driven athletes who refused to accept the biological reality of aging, who alienated everyone around them, and who burned their own legacies to the ground because they could not transition out of the prime mover archetype. When Ronaldo experienced his bitter, highly publicized exit from his second stint at Manchester United, criticizing the club's infrastructure and the manager, the media immediately declared it the tragic, toxic collapse of a megalomaniac. They said the ego had finally consumed the man. Yet, if you look closely at the architecture of his life, away from the cameras, there is a profound grounding mechanism that keeps him from completely floating away into the Randian abyss. It is his absolute, uncompromising devotion to his core family unit, his deep, lifelong reverence for his mother, his dedication to his children, and the way he navigated the tragic loss of his infant son reveal a man who understands that while the professional world requires a cold, rational machine, the private soul still requires a sanctuary. He does not offer his vulnerability to the public, the media, or the collective footballing establishment. He guards it fiercely, sharing it only with those he has actively chosen. This is the ultimate quiet proof of his philosophy. He loves and protects his family, not out of a generic, socially mandated sense of altruism, but because they are the highest, most treasured values of his own sovereign existence. Growth is never a straight, upward trajectory. It is a painful, relentless spiral of proving yourself, conquering the summit, falling, and demanding that the world watch you climb it all over again. When he stood at that press conference and unapologetically declared himself the greatest player in history, he was not asking for our permission. He was stating a foundational law of his own reality. He survived the relentless comparisons, the tactical shifts, and the unforgiving passage of time by holding fiercely to the only thing he could ever truly control, his own mind. He forces us to ask a deeply uncomfortable question. Perhaps the greatest barrier to human excellence is not a lack of talent, but a lack of the sheer, uncompromising selfishness required to actually achieve it. He never waited for the world to let him be great. He simply dared the world to stop him. And this is exactly the kind of pattern I map out in the philosopher's locker room. It is a deep dive into 15 legendary football figures, each paired with a major philosopher, showing how their real careers are living illustrations of profound ideas. Whether it is Ayn Rand's rational egoism, Kierkegaard's dizzying anxiety, Thomas Hobbes's brutal state of nature, or Lao Tzu's effortless art of Wu Wei, this ebook proves that the struggles on the pitch mirror our own. It is 15 legendary players, 15 philosophers, and one book that turns football into a mirror for your own life. You can get it right now for $27 at the link in the description below, because when the stadium lights finally go out, the game is never just a game.